Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Business Graduates Association webinar on North America and the saturation of North American business school education. Today, we're going to really discuss a little bit about innovation and techniques that business schools can explore for their own purposes and kind of standing out from the rest of the market. We've got some great speakers on board with here today, and I will now pass this on to Mark Stoddard, who's our Director of Operations at AMBA and BJ, who will give you a quick introduction to us before we go into much detail. Before I do that also, I want to thank everyone for making it on board here today. We really appreciate that you can take time out of your schedule to listen to this webinar. So without much further ado, Mark, I will make you the presenter.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for this BGA webinar. I think this question on how North American business schools can stand out in the saturated market really it's quite a perennial question really, but one which is brought into sharper focus given the current situation that we are facing globally with this pandemic. So I'm sure this will be an extremely useful and valuable session for everybody. I'm Mark Stoddard. I am the Director of Accreditation and BGA Services, who have responsibility for developing the BGA product globally. And I'm also Director of Accreditation for several parts of the world, including North America. I do have some experience of the US system, having studied some of my undergraduate and master's degrees at the University of California at Berkeley, although I'm sure you can probably tell from my accent that I've spent most of my time living in the UK or traveling globally with work for AMBA and BGA. Now, before we start dealing directly with the question, I just want to say a few words about BGA, Business Graduates Association. So this is a new, distinctive and innovative business school membership and accreditation brand whose vision is to be the global movement for responsible management, positive impact and lifelong learning. And these three core pillars really influence everything that we do. And these elements have been extended into the 9 points of the BGA Charter. Now, I'm not going to read these all out for you here. You can find these on our website and other areas. But really, in order to engage with BGA, whether it's as an individual or as a business school, you essentially need to sign up to say that you agree with these principles and are working towards achieving them. Now, I did say that BGA is a new brand, which it is, but it has actually existed since 1967, which was actually the original name of the organisation, our sister brand, now known as AMBA. So BGA leverages this more than 50 years of experience and expertise of AMBA. And as AMBA, we have accredited several schools, currently accredit several schools in the North American market. So we do have quite a bit of experience in working in this area. And this session is really about distinctiveness, it's about innovation, and we truly believe that BGA does have quite a few distinctive innovative features in what is also quite a saturated market for accreditation and business school services. So we think we are the only organisation of this type that has an explicit focus on responsible management and explicitly references the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, while pretty much all accreditation organisations will mention responsible management at some point, and as well they should, we are the only one that has this up front and centre as one of our three core pillars. We also have the continuous impact model, which is our continuous improvement model based around impact. And so business schools going through the accreditation process have to develop and measure their impact on a number of areas and a number of stakeholders and show how this improvement over time has led to the improvement of their business school, their programs and their offerings to stakeholders. We have what we consider to be a unique validation route, which is an in-between stage between membership and accreditation, which schools can use as a desktop basis as a quality assurance mechanism. Schools can also every year take advantage of our desktop reviews. This is a free consultancy service that we provide for schools, which they can choose to use on a variety of areas. It might be on program development, it might be on developing an international strategy, for example. And another one of the really core features of BGA is that we allow all students of member business schools to join BGA for free. And so we offer a variety of networking and career development services for these students. We think it's really quite a strong part of the BGA offering. So now to move on to the question at hand for this webinar session, and I'm delighted that we have two such experienced speakers with us today who will share their views on this subject and then we'll obviously answer some questions afterwards. So we have first Dr. Niljan Sen, who is Dean of the School of Business at the University of Albany. He was formerly Associate Dean of Graduate Studies at Nanyang Business School, Nanyang Technology University. And we are very pleased to say that Albany is the first BGA member school in North America. And then we're also joined by Dr. Henrik Totteman, who is Professor at Practice and former Campus Dean at Hult International Business School. He's also part of the teaching faculty at Harvard University Continuing Education and President of Lead Extreme. And Henrik is also BGA's International Advisor for North America. So I will now hand over to Dr. Sen, who will say a few words about this topic before we pass over to Henrik and then take some questions. So Dr. Sen, over to you.
Well, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Welcome to our session. This is a very timely topic. When we started thinking about differentiation, North American market, the business schools here, the business higher education in North American market, particularly in the US where we are sitting right now, has lots of sort of challenges. And when we talk about differentiation in a crowded market, it depends on also how we sort of define that market. Yes, there are lots of thousands of universities and schools in North America, but there are other parts of the world where, let's say Asia, for example, where there's a tremendous mismatch in the demand and supply there. So a lot depends on your positioning and which market that you have in mind and where you want to sort of take your programs to. But before we get into some of the ways that we can start differentiating ourselves from other programs and other universities and schools, it'll be good to sort of take a look at some of the challenges that we are facing right now. And these were all there pretty much even before COVID-19. If I can sort of move the screen here. Okay, there you are. So again, as I said, these challenges were pretty much there over the last few years, and we were all aware of it. We were struggling with it. We were grappling with it. But now COVID-19 has given obviously a sense of urgency. Let's start with on the left-hand side, which is the market side, where the students and the demand for the schools and the programs. There is a demographic shift going on. It has already started, and the size of the cohort size of the high school graduates will be shrinking. According to some estimates, it will be going down by 6 to 7% to the tune of 1 million students till 2026. So that's one of the challenges is already out there. Combined with that, let's take the other significant group which we attract from all over the world, international students. We're also seeing decline in the applications. Whether you look at the total number of F1 student visa, which has been issued over the last 2-3 years, or the number of applications in the top 20 MBA programs, which dropped around 10 to 13%. So there are challenges of attracting the international students. There are more choices, there are more institutions back home in their home countries and all of that. Coming back to domestic students, We all know the tuitions have been going up for quite a few years. And associated with that is student debt. The total outstanding debt is now in the tune of, more than $1.5 trillion. But more than that, there has been some reluctance and averseness towards borrowing more money from the students' point of view. Remember, these students who are coming into undergrad, they have, say, in 2001 bubble burst, they have the big recession in 2008. And so they're much more cautious in terms of, taking on a significant amount of debt. This emergence of new segments, while the traditional high school coming for the 4-year colleges is going down in terms of the cohort size, the adult population is an opportunity there. And there's also change in the mix of the population. We will be expecting a lot more students from underrepresented minorities, Afro-American students, Latino students will be a higher percentage in the student body. So that's some of the challenges existing on the students, on the demand for the classes and the total number of the market size there. Move to the right, we have issues related to the business model and the curriculum. If you look at the mix of private schools and the state support has significantly come down over the years. There are schools where the state support was in the order of 70% of the budget, is probably now down to 10%, 13%, 15% of the budget. So we are a lot less dependent on the state and lot more tuition driven. Okay, so that the tuition with the higher expenses, the financial model has really changed, and we need to probably look at alternative models to make this thing opportunities available to a wider cross section of the population. Second one, related, which has been brewing for quite a few years, and there's global discussions going on about this, and it's about the curriculum. And there's not one individual school. In general, we are talking the business school curriculum. When I talk to my corporate recruiters, the alumni, everybody's asking about when do we see more of technology orientation in the curriculum? Where is the blockchain? Where is artificial intelligence? Where is the machine learning? Where is the data science? All of that needs to be incorporated in the business school's curriculum. Again, and we're not talking about necessarily doing deep dive in the technology side, but have to understand it enough for the implication for the business models, and for the decision making. The concept of algorithmic CEO, we need to be preparing the leaders in much more different way. So a lot of the schools, as well as all of the consortium of the schools, we're looking at changing that curriculum to really reflect the needs of the marketplace right now. So that's an ongoing process, will continue to happen. The shift is going on as we speak, sort of. Program structure, even before COVID, more so definitely after the COVID-19, there's been a change in we need different kinds of modalities in our education. The classic model of 4-year education will still be there, because as we say, that's a perfect way of young adults coming in, taking risk, learning to take risk, learning curriculum, learning relationship, developing relationship in a very protected environment. So we allow them to take the risk in a protected environment for 4 years, and as they graduate, they move on in the marketplace. So that will always be there. But with the changing demographics and every other needs, while students working, while going to schools, we need online, we need synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, all the different models. And one of the positives of COVID-19 has been a lot of our faculty, we were hesitant to jump into the online curriculum and teaching. It has been I'm so grateful working with the faculty. They jumped in almost over a week, retooled themselves, went to seminars, had peer reviews, had discussions, shared the good practices, and good teachers were always good teachers. So there's a tremendous transition, and a lot of them are very much open. And now, right now, for going sort of at least partially conducting classes in that way. So we're likely to see more. And with tuition differences, we might have a pricing for a 4-year college, we might have pricing for synchronous, we might have pricing for asynchronous. So that for different needs for different clientele. Assessment has to go through a change. Today's marketplace asking for a broader assessment beyond the grades. How are they doing in their internship? What is their skill set in the soft skill side? What is their score in a leadership, training, communication training, communication skills, and all of that? So we might have to rethink about that indirect assessment and make it a much more sort of holistic way. Last but not the least, we will also have series of short-term stackable certificates leading up to degrees. Apples, Googles of the world are basically telling potential applicants saying, not necessarily degree, bring me what you have, bring to the table your skill set. So it's very possible someone with a 2-year college has a sort of relevant skill set, starts working with this big organization, and while doing that, they pick up this series of stackable certificate leading to a concentration or undergraduate degree or even a master's degree. So challenges are holistic, there's all there. It was always there in the last quite a few years. It has been growing. And now there's, as I said, there's a lot of urgency in doing that. So that's the background for the particularly the North American sort of market. One thing before we get into differentiation, we want to make sure that just being different is not our goal. We need to be sort of distinct, but at the same time, be part of that puzzle. Be part of that, we have to sort of fit into there. A related issue might be, we often talk about is, there's no such school like bad school, good school. It's the right school for the right students. So the pairing is very important. Understanding the students that you attract and you want to attract is very important, because every different groups have a certain kind of needs and you should be prepared to serve that particular need. And then only the match becomes really meaningful for all the stakeholders. So moving forward with the differentiation, this is obvious, right? In the sense that when we talk about differentiation, we need to ask ourselves that, well, what are the students looking for? What is the market looking for? What are the needs? And then what can we do? And what we are good at doing. Not every one of the schools can be good at doing everything. So we need to be very clear about our ability to deliver certain things, our ability to differentiate in a certain way, and then keep in mind, if we differentiate in that way, what kind of needs are we servicing in the marketplace? So less obvious is, whom are we differentiating against? And what we'll talk about soon, and they are not mutually sort of exclusive completely. You might be in several of those buckets at the same time, but we need to be aware of that whom are we differentiating against? What's our the sort of the target market that we have in mind at different situations. So, let's talk about the differentiation spaces. Starting from the very left, which we call the sort of the next door. Now, what's the definition of the next door? Well, these are the schools which looks very similar. They might be physically next door to you or may not be physically next door, but they looks very similar to you in the mind of your prospects. Okay, their prospects are doing the research. They know as much about those schools as they know about you. So, they're pretty much, they have done the research, they have found out about both the schools, and in their mind, you're coming across as similar. Okay. We need to be very, very aware of this set of schools. This is the school which might keep you away in the night. I'll give you an example. Not necessarily North America. I moved here from Singapore, where, as you saw, I was at Nanyang Technological University. The two primary schools were National University of Singapore and NTU. When you look at the MBA program, this will be an example of a next door. International students coming, Singapore is same for both the schools. The attractiveness Singapore is there for both the schools. Great curriculum, faculty research, it's there. Okay, resources primarily coming from the government, well-endowed resources, it's all there. Internationalization, by definition, is a great international city, it's there. Both students were pretty diversified. So, how do you, see, in the mind of the prospects, it look very similar. Now, but the threats there, obviously you're competing and you have market share is in mind, because all those students who are coming there primarily to these two students, let's talk about MBA market only. They are looking at these two schools as an MBA market, MBA competition. Now, it often boils down that you might have to come down to the last step to differentiate. What is the last step? Can be different. Can be you're talking about scholarship. Everything is done on path. Pricing is the same. Pricing is similar, but how much scholarship that we can provide to the students in that particular year? How much is the career service distinction can be there. So the last bit of thing, how much you are engaging the students even after admission letter has gone up. So those things can come into play when they look very, very similar in the eyes of your prospects. So that's next. Then comes to the next group of things. These are the schools that the students have already have some kind of prior, and they're looking at these schools because of certain elements they have in mind. Now, you may or may not be part of that group in their mind already, but they are looking at this set of schools. And we need to find out what these schools are talking about. What is the feature about these schools which the prospects is getting appealed? What is the appeal to the prospect about these features? Once we know that, it will be very difficult to win the competition and differentiate yourself if you appear somewhat similar. Very, very difficult because they already have the prior mind share in the mind of the prospects. Now, if you want to aspire to differentiate this group, your messaging has to be completely out of the box, something those schools are not talking about. Some aspects of the university and program that they're not really talking about at all. Okay, so can be student service, can be curriculum, can be something which is they are not focusing, but you have to focus on to differentiate yourself. Third one is the noisy. What we are calling noisy is the group that you think about as the competitors. In our mind, in the school's mind, these are the competitors. So by definition, they are a little bit similar. By definition, over the years, have attracted similar kind of students, maybe in different buckets, but similar kind of students. Now you have a choice here. You have to perform better in some of these performance metrics. You don't have a choice. You have to perform better, and your performance needs to be highlighted in a way which makes it very, very distinctive. So that's your noisy group. The last one is what we call the natural, which is the natural group of the school that everyone speaks in the same breath. So examples will be the group of Ivy League, right? A group of liberal arts colleges, group of public Ivy League schools, public universities, which has high reputation in terms of teaching and research like the Ivy Leagues, but they're state schools. So there's a natural groupings are there. Now, there, I think one of the most distinctive way you can have to differentiate will be your alumni. Because, take the high end of the school, Stanford and, Berkeley and, and Michigan and, Cornell and all of those groups. Even in that group, you're saying they all have distinctive positioning, but they have the brand and all of that is there. Placement, no problem. Opportunities, no problem. Entrepreneurship, yes, but maybe different in that alumni, how the alumni is building that brand, how the alumni is positioning. They're your ambassadors. So involving the alumni, which is a much more credible brand, will go a long way in differentiating in this particular market. So putting it all together, just to summarize yourself, depending where you are, your strategies might be a little different. Your next door, as we say, which are pretty much same in the eyes of the prospect, it comes down to the last level, maybe scholarships. Okay, and if you have a much more better endowment, much more better way of managing your funds, alumni support, maybe scholarships. The noisy ones, as we said, curriculum, student success, and branding. Particularly, I want to stress the student success, because in these schools where in the mind of the students, prospects are the same. What we are saying is that as a professional school, the commitment to the student success let's say in the business school programs, they come here primarily for a better job, better prospects after the graduation. And this is something more can be done by a lot of the schools. And with the socioeconomic changes that is going on, even in the North American market, a lot of 30% of our students come from first-generation families, first-generation college-going families. This is a key issue for them. Not only that they will be fantastic students, they will drive themselves hard, they will perform the grades, all of that. But what about the development outside the classroom? What about the mentoring from the alumni, mentoring from the faculty? What about exposing them to different kind of professional network? So all of those will be becoming a key element. The last part, as we say, is the natural, is the alumni, and the near part, which is the the things which list here, which is the how do we differentiate in an area which is other schools are not talking about. So maybe community engagement. Yes, we do the teaching, we do the research, we do the faculty support, student support, and all of that. But then we also focus on community engagement. We have great industry engagement, and again, maybe our faculty as good a research as any other place, but they have a professional orientation in the sense they do a lot of consulting. They are involved in startups, and they are engaged as research faculty in some of the companies. They're sitting in multiple boards. So when you highlight that aspect, which other schools are not really focusing on, completely different parameters, then you might differentiate yourself. So those are my preliminary thoughts. I think it's a very interesting issue. I'd like to hear not only from other speakers, but all of you attending, your thoughts, what you're doing in your arena, and how we can, as a holistic way, how we can really put this whole business education in a much more firmer and solid platform going forward, in a much more engaged way with the industry, and be a real true professional set of schools like medical schools and legal schools and all of that, and contribute to the overall impact. I mean, for example, what we are saying in our school to differentiate ourselves is from opportunity to impact, because we believe in that student success. That is our differentiator, right? But different schools under the different standards will have different strategies. With that, I'll stop here and then move on with the. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sen. And now over to Professor Henrik Tötterman. Henrik?
Yes, I will put on my presentation from here. Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Dr. Sen. I really appreciated your previous presentation. It was a great insight, of course, for all of us, but also a great introduction to what I'm planning to talk about today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provoke you a little bit. I like to provoke, and of course, on top of that, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship and innovation. And like you heard from Mark, I'm also a former dean, and nowadays I work as a full-time professor and also run my small consulting company. So I kind of come to this with some background in the field, but of course also with a mindset of we need to do something in order for us to change and perform in the current landscape, but also in the future to the best in terms of our mission and the vision of the institution that we represent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of tap into social change. I'm going to talk a little bit about governance. I'm going to talk about generating value. I'm going to talk about inclusion. Then I'm going to wrap up with engagement. And I hope that from my presentation, we get a good discussion, but we also capture some tools, some insights, and some experiences that I've encountered over the years myself, together with my colleagues, together with my students, and of course also together with the larger, more broad landscape of business education, if you want. So first of all, I think as an entrepreneurship professor, I need to start from the customer, the consumer, the client, and of course in our case it's the student. And I think it's really important for any institution to truly understand and capture who is the student, and of course what are the perceived values of the student, but also what are the perceived values of their future employers, what are the needs of the future employers, and what are they looking for. Very much like we also saw in the previous presentation, there is a supply and demand, and we want to ensure that we capture these two. I think Hult International Business School has done a remarkable job in really tapping into understanding who the students are who come into the institution. They do that in multiple different kind of ways, but one is, for example, on the homepage, they have something called Dream Job Mapper, which allows prospect students, but also current students and alumni to define their future aspiration in terms of their careers. And that, of course, is great insights in a data kind of driven world for us as an institution to define who are the students who are interested in an education, how can we align with them. And of course, on top of that, the school has invested a lot of energy in understanding truly what employers are looking for. And then, of course, in the middle, we have the curriculum and how that is shaping the incoming students to the best of the future in terms of the jobs that they are aspiring to land on. That's something I think is the starting point for me. It's really important, because otherwise we kind of miss a grand opportunity as educators to connect the students with the employers out there. So let's move over to look on social change. And I'm going to start with something that Mark already tapped into a little bit. I'm going to take us to think about United Nations and the global goals. And of course, when we look on this, I'm pretty sure that all of us have seen these 17 different goals by now. And when we look on them, some of them feel very overwhelming. They're wicked, large global problems. And we are not sure if our institution is fully aligned with those. And if it is, how could we kind of make those real, and how could we make them part of our DNA? And this is something, of course, that many schools have been tapping into, but I think from my experience as a professor, I want to kind of relate especially to Hult and what we have done at Hult International Business School in terms of taking these goals and making it part of our daily operations, and of course also our mission and the vision that we've been driving for the past years. That, of course, is captured in the Prime report that Hult is publishing along with many other schools on a kind of a regular basis. But the reality there is, why I think it's so interesting, is that that kind of mantra and mindset of these goals has given us as an institution a goal direction and objective, but it has also given us as professors something that we bring into our everyday teaching, and of course also for our students something to tap into and connect to, both in their studies, but of course also as they're educating themselves to become future business leaders. So just one example from that kind of realm is something I'm particularly proud of. One of my first students when I first started with Hult in 2010 in Boston was a gentleman called Ahmad Ashkar. Together with his MBA peers, they came up with a very bold proposal. And that was a proposal to create a global case competition that will solve some of those global needs that we encounter and see around the world, especially in pressing emerging markets and initially a lot in urban slums. It only took a couple of years for Bill Clinton to kind of capture this. He actually was on the front of Time magazine talking about Hult Prize as one of the top 5 initiatives in the world that may change how we perceive the kind of business schools input and insight, and of course also impact in the society at large. And that, of course, was for me truly exciting. And over the years, this has been going on. And of course, from many different institutions, we have had competitors as part of Hult Prize. And the finals in New York are by now a well-known, of course, phenomena. And together with first with Bill Clinton and the Global Initiative, we worked to build this. And today, Hult Prize is partnering with United Nations in offering this competition. And of course, the finals are in normal conditions hosted at the headquarters. Here is a picture of my daughter, and in front of her, you can see President Clinton and some of the contestants talking about their solution. And I think that this is a grand example of how we can engage not only the top leadership of a business school in these global initiatives, kind of global goals, but how we can also engage our students. And that takes us to the next point I want to make. It's about governance. So when we look on governance, it's easy to think about big budgets. How on earth were Hult Prize kind of students able to do something of that grand magnitude? How were they able to get Bill Clinton involved and so forth? It must have cost a lot of money. And I think that's the wrong question. And it's the wrong discussion. The right discussion is, how on earth the students of Hult International Business School have the will and guts to push forward with something that actually they did in the first year with their own budgets, their own money, and they put it to the kind of table as a solution that business schools could actually have a role, not only in the region, but also globally in making a difference, making a change. After that first year, yes, there has been more money put into it and more resources in every shape and way possible. But the reality is that the starting point started from students, and actually we as faculty, we as staff, we as leadership were initially a little bit cautious, and when we saw that this could actually become something, we started to promote and sponsor it more. But the reality is that we put in place at Hult way before my time when I came there in 2010, and ever since, something I would call metered funding, which is basically an explorative way of dealing with different projects and processes. So we test and explore and see what sticks, and those things that stick we invest more energy into, and those things that don't stick we actually allow to fall off the radar and move on to something more of importance and priority. And this, I think, is a grand lesson for many universities and business schools, many of those that I've been involved with also in the past, that we often hang on too long to different projects that we are in love with. It could be a research center, it could be a program, it could be anything of that kind of kind. And my kind of message is that if we would have this explorative mindset, like I have seen at Hult International Business School, that could help many of us to allow ourselves to explore, and then of course invest in those opportunities that can lead us to a better place in the future. One of my kind of frequent lunch friends and the companions I sit down with to have intellectual discussions is Paul Nunes, and he's one of the authors to a book from Accenture called Pivot to the Future. And in that book, they discuss 7 relevant strategies for disruption, and especially times of disruption. And this book was written well before the current pandemic that we are exploring. And when I look on those 7 strategies, I think individually and perhaps partly by combining those, they are highly, highly relevant for us business schools. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see a number of different accreditors and regulators listed. And those are actually the ones who regulate and accredit Hult International Business School. Some are mandated for us in order for us to operate globally with campuses in US, in UK, in China, and of course also in Dubai. But others are also voluntary and used, of course, for continuous improvement of a global institution. I've been long enough a dean, also a professor and a student, that I know that many of us, they feel a little bit that regulation and accreditation is a necessary burden. But in reality is that at Hult I've learned over the years to see accreditors and the regulators as our champions, as our challenger, and as our kind of source for innovation, in the way that they give us a framework to operate in. And then as a business school, it's our responsibility, but also our pride to use those as our supporters to build something of magnitude. And for example, when I look on Hult operating globally, the regulators have actually kind of forced us to think about who has the strictest norm, strictest regulation, and how do we as an institution ensure that we stick in every different kind of section to that regulation and rule. And by that, we've been able to create a school that is operating to the highest standard, highest norm across all of these regulators. And that's something that I'm very impressed by, but also proud of being part of the team building this over the years. Then, of course, I think as business schools, we also need to eat a little bit of our own dog food. And jokingly saying, of course, dog food, I want to take this back to Professor Clayton Christensen, the late professor from Harvard Business School. And he, of course, is very well known for his innovator's dilemma. But I would like to kind of hone in specifically on these 10 questions that he's arguing that every single business should think about in order to kind of avoid being disrupted, but also to stay ahead. And when I look on these 10 questions, and when I use one of the skills that Clayton Christensen, along with his colleagues, have taught me, it's called associating, I realized quickly that all of these 10 are highly relevant for all of us on this call today. So I encourage you to actually go back to our own dog food and eat some of our food, because I think often as business schools, as universities, educational institutions, we forget about these elements. We start overly complicate things for us. So go back to the kind of the readings, and I think there is some really good insight for us as business schools as well. Then I want to move over to talk a little bit about generating value, and this is actually from Paul Nunes and his friends from Accenture. We have seen S-curves ever since the 70s, so it shouldn't be anything new to us. But I like this model a lot, and I think it puts us in the current realm of the pan-epidemic. Everyone's talking right now about the pan-epidemic. It's just amazing how we are, of course, overwhelmed by this challenge, and of course, with a lot of tragedy coming with it. The reality is that we have a past as institutions, and we also, of course, have an obligation in the current, and we also have an obligation in building something for the future. And when I look on this kind of 3S curve graph, we look on the old is something that we should not forget about. We should really continue, even in this pan-epidemic, to build and invest in the old that has kind of taken us where we are. But we shall never forget that there is going to be a future also after this pan-epidemic. We need to start already now also considering what that looks like. And I'm sure that this pan-epidemic has taught all of us that the future is going to be different than the past. And of course, all of this is driven and accelerated by technology, very much the platform, for example, that we are using right now. So looking on this model, we need to build our future. We can't kind of leave our past immediately. We need the past to build that kind of transition, and that's really important. And I think this model captures that very nicely. And then, of course, some of you may have noticed and seen that Hult International Business School announced together with EY very recently this collaboration. And some of you may think that this is a coincidence with the pan-epidemic emerging right now. The reality is that Hult is a school which is very aspirational and wants to be the most relevant business school in the world. And I think this collaboration has been simmering for a long time, and the announcement happened to be in this time and age. But I think we as business schools, we need to think into that future, seeing how it looks like. And I think that's exactly what Hult is doing here. And of course, building on one of the assets that a business school has, which is the right to grant degrees, and doing that with a fabulous collaborating party, EY in this instance. Hult International Business School has its background in consulting because it was actually founded by Arthur D. Little as the Arthur D. Little School of Management in Boston. So in that sense, you could say that we're building on the old in the present in order for us to move into the future with a partnership like this. And the future holds to tell us what will happen with this. But I'm truly excited of this opportunity, and of course to work with stellar consultants and executives at EY. Then moving over to talking about inclusion a little bit. I think there are a couple of things. I think often we as business school leaders, we look on the world from a very practical standpoint. We need to have alumni activated in the community because we need their input, resources, donations often. We need to have a fresh and healthy enrollment in order to have our institution running. But I would like to take us back to my original point. If we don't truly understand who the student is, what the student's capabilities are, what their needs are, and also understand what the employer's needs are, and of course also on a larger level the societal needs, then we are losing out on something. I was involved developing Hult's new MBA curriculum some years ago, and in that curriculum development, we were constantly thinking about all of these different levels of stakeholders that are going to be benefiting from the program, participating in the program, but of course also investing into the program and trying to think about win-win scenarios across all of these stakeholders. And I think if ever today, it's truly important to think beyond the immediate and think about the university, kind of the ecosystem that we are part of, and how can we ensure that we create value for all different stakeholders. And of course, like the kind of Paul Nunes story from the book from Accenture is telling us, there is a lot of technology out there that is going to enable us to innovate and break mold. So we need to be, as business schools, bold in investing in those, but also in engaging different stakeholders and forcing ourselves to make that transition. And that doesn't come easy. and it doesn't come if we are selfish as faculty, selfish as deans, or selfish as employees, or selfish as students. We need to all think about the new future, about that possess kind of holds to us, and how we can help the institution to transform into that new future. And hopefully with that come also some recognition. Here you see recognition for Hult member. One is the Innovation Award for the MBA program, and then very recently we also got an award for our career strategy and how we are executing that together with all the stakeholders in the society that are relevant for bringing our students to the job market. So then my very final slide is taking us back to 1905. And this is my great-grandfather, and he was living in a very different world than the one we are exploring today. Saying that he grew up in Finland, where I'm from as well. And in Finland, he built a very successful kind of platform for a family business that is still hovering around. My family is not monetary-wise involved in it anymore, but of course we have the family ties. And when I look on how he defined the role of a business leader in society, I think it's particularly important to kind of look on that one right now, here today. A business leader is a servant of the community who earns a pay for being able to create something new, respectable, and durable, which everyone needs. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like each and every one of you to change that word business leader for a while into dean, professor, why not employee, and of course back to business leader. Because as business schools, our responsibility is to create servants of the community who earns a pay for being able to create something new, respectable, and durable, which everyone needs. That's, ladies and gentlemen, everything I had to say. Just wrapping up with a slide, kind of giving my contact details. And then it's back to you, Victor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Henrik. Really great presentation. And now actually comes the fun part, where we have a bit of a discussion format where you are free to, of course, ask any questions of the panelists or of Mark directly. Mark will moderate this discussion. Mark, do you want to kind of start off with a few questions you had while the attendees ask their questions?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I've got sort of 2 or 3 questions here that I'd like to ask, but obviously stop me if other people have other questions coming in.
Of course.
But my first one really is, why in your view do you think, if you do think that business schools so often struggle to differentiate themselves? And what business school leaders do about it. I mean, I asked that question on the basis of my experience of working with Amber and BGA for many years. Going to business schools where very often the mission could be the mission of the business school next door. Very, very similar mission statements. Some business schools have often star professors of strategy, star professors in marketing, and yet their strategy in marketing isn't particularly distinctive or differentiated. So why do you think this is an issue? And what as business school leaders can be done to enact some of the things that you've been talking about that don't seem to be coming through at all business schools?
I can start with a few pointers, and then obviously we can join in. I think the major challenge within the business school about differentiating is the entrepreneurial mindset that we just talked about. I think oftentimes we get bogged down about the regulatory guidelines, which some of them obviously are meaningful, given the curriculum, given the usual things and ongoing things we have to do to make it like we have it. So I mean, once you sort of do that, I think then becomes very clear what the way should be approached, and differentiation becomes much more easier. As I was sharing with you before, once we realize the nature of our population being a state school, and with a mandate to our state population, with 30–40% coming from first generation college going kids, I mean, it becomes very clear that what you need to do to play to your mission and vision that shapes your mission and vision statement, and that pretty much takes us to our differentiation, which is we will be the platform for opportunities, and we'll do everything possible to that regard. You know? And that also sort of has created our alumni, and therefore that has become a strength. So leverage on the strength. I'll give you an example, a simple thing that COVID happened, and we overnight went to online. Faculty made the transition, got training in the Zoom and other platforms, changed their curriculum in a certain way, which is more fitting towards the online version. And then we realized when the classes opened up the spring break, this thing happened in the spring break, is that a lot of our students do not have the bandwidth or the Wi-Fi in the home and a laptop at home. North American campuses, certainly the state campuses, are great equalizer. When you come in, it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background, you're all on the level playing field. And that's something with all the schools, particularly the North American state schools, should be very, very proud about. But then you suddenly go back, the differences come up. So what did we do? Well, play to your mission, play to our vision, play to our strength. We approached the alumni saying, we need to give them laptops. You won't believe they just got it. We didn't have to ask. They just immediately, realized that they were sensitive to this. And we raised close to $200,000 in a 2 or 3 week period to buy laptops, send it to them, sometimes buy train tickets, flight tickets to send them home or bring them back to allow them to live on campus, give them scholarship to live on campus. We opened up the dorm from some of them to stay on campus. We even helped out some of the families and the kids with this, because the families got affected in the COVID-19 to buy medicines and things. But what I'm saying that all of those happened because we exactly knew what we were, and we were behaving like a true entrepreneur. As we were pointing out in the last presentation, do your commitment as a serious leader, whether it's a business or an entrepreneur or a company, you have your commitment to serve the needs of these students. And so I think if you stay true to your mission and true to what you are, and therefore leverage on who you are, I think you have a bit higher chance of differentiating in that crowded marketplace.
Yeah, building on that, I completely agree with Dr. Sen. The mission is something that we often, of course, relate to and refer to, but in so many different institutions, both in academia and in business, the mission is something that is a little bit dusty, and the organization doesn't really know about it. At Hult, I have to say I'm amazed. We have always had an aspirational mission, and it has changed once during my time. And I still today remember the first one very well, becoming the global business school, the most global business school, and then the second one becoming the most relevant business school. If I go around faculty, everyone more or less will know the current mission because it's so tangible and practical, and it's part of their everyday work and everyday life. And I think the students would resonate with that as well. So that's why I think that the mission needs to be something that is helping people to align and join and move forward. And I think quickly on that point as well, I think there is a perception, talking about saturated business school market, there is a perception of how a business school should look like, what kind of programs they should be running. And I think that has led many business schools on the wrong path. We're trying to satisfy different stakeholders rather than really being true to your mission and driving what makes you really unique. I've seen schools who try to become global and international when they actually have a very rich base in their home region, and they should actually start bringing the world to their region rather than the other way around, and all of those things, because they assume that that's what accreditors, for example, are looking for.
Great, thank you both very much for that. And that was sort of a top-down question, sort of a related question, more sort of bottom-up. How as business school leaders can you encourage innovation and create space for it to thrive from within your school? How can you create space to allow faculty, program managers, for example, administrators, how can you give them space to enable them to bring their innovation to bear on the business school and make it more innovative and stand out?
If I can sort of start with a few observations on that, depends on well, bottom line is creating the right culture in that particular institution and particular business school. That has to be a very priority to allow every stakeholder internally to really rise up and make a difference. Easier said than done, because again, we are bogged down with the regular, sort of firefighting and, addressing urgencies and all of that. But when you look at most of the changes, good suggestions, and innovation, they really need to come up from the bottom up. So the leadership of the institution and the colleges should be very open and should always provide this assurance to every staff. I'm talking about staff. I think oftentimes we do not provide enough attention to the quality of professional staff in the business school. It's only in the last 5 to 10 years that more and more schools are actually appreciating need for very high-end business professional to work in the business school. Think about a marketing director, think about a recruitment, think about career service. You really need some serious top-notch guys to work in this. People with experience, people who have worked on the other side of the fence, understand what the industry needs, what the skill set is required, then come over and take a leadership role in the staffing position, or even as clinical faculty, doing research with applied areas and all of that. So I think it's very, very important to have that mix and have that culture where we are encouraging the feedback to come back strongly from bottom up, from all your stakeholders, and keep talking to industry, keep talking to alumni, keep talking to your current students, keep talking to recent graduates as well as incoming high school graduates, because we need to have the market. One of the big difference is that if you look at the other two professional schools, law and medicine, most of those faculty there actually is practicing. Now in business school, we need to move more in that direction. Not everybody has to move in that direction, but there should be a portfolio of faculty so that quite a high percentage of them are practicing what they're teaching in the class. And therefore that will have a seamless movement of the needs and the curriculum and the practices and the soft skill training and leadership training going back and forth between. So I think that is very important.
Yeah, I fully agree that the kind of top leadership needs to sponsor a culture that engages people to innovate and of course to dare step out from the norm and do something new. I think there are kind of two different aspects there. One is it can be quite disciplined. You organize different innovation chambers, groups who work on a specific topic, but I would also encourage very open-ended innovation. And I think in my example earlier with price, it was nothing that we in the leadership were thinking about. It was something that students in their classroom activities saw as an opportunity, and then they brought that into fruition. And with the sponsoring kind of leadership and faculty, it actually became something. But I think if you don't allow the universe to explore, then it's going to be limited in terms of innovation. So I think some kind of a program for open-ended innovation is really helpful. And then, of course, ensuring that you have a process that selects the most fruitful ideas and move those forward.
Great, thank you very much for that.
We have a couple of
any other questions from?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions from the audience, Mark.
Let's take those. I know we're a little bit short on time, but let's take those.
Yeah, we're a little short on time, but let's try and get through a couple of them. The first one is, what can schools do to innovate in the area of alumni associations and providing further value to alumni?
Well, I could start on that one. I visited once as an assessor at school, and the dean of the school told me that Hult Prize, I'm promoting a little bit here, sorry for that, but Hult Prize is becoming the reason for for this kind of alumni activity to go up 30%. And basically what the school had done, they put a little bit of budget for teams to compete in Hult Prize, but then he engaged the alumni community to be mentors for these teams. And the alumni just loved it because that allowed them to be involved in helping current students prosper and improve. In that way, create some activities that helps alumni to come back, not only for money, but also for other reasons.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, the various aspects, various ways we need to sort of keep the alumni engaged. And I completely agree that they would love to contribute. They have benefited from the school. They have experienced a wonderful time of their life in the 4 or 6 years in the school, and they would like to give back any way they want. We have to create that platform so they can find their own. Different people can get fired with different ways. So the imagination is endless. Mentoring is definitely one of them, but there should be also a value proposition for them to come back and stay engaged in the school. So a couple of things, we can open up any new innovative classes to the alumni to come back. Now virtually online is even more easier for them. You can allow them, all of our advisory boards are completely driven by alumni. We have multiple boards, one in New York and one in Albany, and then we have different program advisory board. So all of those are stacked with alumni. They find ways to contribute. They find way to, you share what you're doing, and you don't ask for a specific thing, but when you share a particular cause, it fires the imagination. So one of the examples again is that we are moving to more direct admit students because we want to have the business school graduates early on. Traditional business school has been, you get to the business university, and then after 2 years, you become a business school student. These are high quality students based on an SAT and high school grades and all. So they have competition. So we wanted to create scholarship. Immediately it rang a bell because we are trying to get a quality scholarships in. We're talking about curriculum. You give them the mindset that you're open, they come up with ideas. Again, one example, we are now getting into the areas of exploring into the areas of wealth management. That track was not there with us. A lot of our graduates in accounting and finance has started working in that area over the years. They're telling us the model has changed. This is more of an internship book building process right now. You don't make any cold calls, anything. You're coming under a leader and then gradually take over the portfolio. The ideas came from them. We're immediately starting talking with them, developing the curriculum with the consultation and developing the internship opportunities and all of that. They're the one who are sort of telling us that start a buddy process. So we are putting together a sort of a buddy process from your senior student, and then that buddy process gradually leads into the mentoring process by the alumni. They're just excited about it. So I think so many different ways they can sort of contribute. But our charge is to go ahead and engage them first. The more we have engagement in different ways, simply starting from speaking in the classroom, simply just getting them in the graduate level, getting them involved in the admission process, in the interview panel. And they're much more, they have a much more higher standard than the probably school, but get them involved. So find meaningful engagement in every aspect, because if nothing else, not for the funding, it's just the brightest of your students who are already making an impact is now you're getting their mind share, and that can be only a win-win situation.
Thank you for that. We have another question here. We have heard that students from China come to the US for undergraduate programs, but are staying in China to build their network. Is this a trend you are seeing too?
Well, at Albany, we don't have very large, significant international students. So, and COVID has distorted everything right now. Obviously, this is a very hard year for international students. Even if they can process their paperwork for admissions and all of that, the consulates are not even open to process the visas. But in general, if you talk about that, is a very important consideration in the mind of the students. A lot of other part of the world, there's a shift in the economic activity in the center of gravity. If you look at, I was 15 years spent in Singapore after I finished working in the US for 12 years. One of the data was to suggest that within 7 years of flying distance, there are 4.2 billion population. That's 70% of the population. Huge number of students from China, India, Southeast Asia, all of them, obviously demand is much more higher than the supply. But these students are realizing that it's important to build the local network. While quality education is equally important, but you have to have the network, especially when they plan to at some point come back and work in that given the economic opportunity. So one possibility that we are exploring and is have a 2+2 program, 3+2 program. That is, they start in their good domestic institutions there, spend a couple of years, you map that curriculum to your curriculum here, and that there are some challenges because we are much more sort of have liberal arts and have a general education component, which is traditionally missing in some of those Asian schools, for example. We are a 4-year program, they have a 3-year program. So all of those challenges are there, but if they finish those 2 years and the mapping is done properly, then we can transfer those credits to us and we can give them our degree. They can transfer our credits back to them, and these students can end up with 2 different degrees, 2 different set of network. They come out as a global students. I think that's something we need to explore more and more, and I think it will be a win-win situation for the institution, for our domestic students. They get exposure to them. Our students can start visiting some of those institutions, and certainly the international students, whether they stay back or go back, doesn't matter. They become a global citizens, truly serving the society.
Great. Henrik, do you want to say something on that?
No, I think if I look on the Chinese and the Indian student population overall, they are so large that I think they kind of contain many different strategies and individual missions. So in that sense, it's hard to answer that question kind of in a short way. Let's put it that way.
Okay, great. Well, I know we're running quite a bit over time. There's one more question that I think is worth exploring here, and that is about stackable certificates. And the person here asks, what can a school do in the area of stackable certificates to stand out? Is this the future of education?
Yeah, I'm currently teaching at Harvard Extension School in a program which is a certificate-based program. So you take a number of courses and then you get a certificate at the end. And it's immensely popular, and I see students really kind of craving for that. And I can also see other schools moving more and more into this. And it's a very interesting opportunity, of course, to stand out in a specific area as a student. For example, if you don't have a master's degree from before, this can be a shortcut to a master, kind of to some of the skills related to that. But of course, it can also be a way of defining yourself as a leader with more financial, for example, financial skills in your portfolio.
No, I think I agree that there is this opportunity. See, Europe has been doing that for a long time. When we call it Masters in Management, right? You can come, take your classes, pick up, you can offer 6 or 7 or 8 certificates. As long as you do 3 or 4 out of those available certificates, then you get a Masters in Management. So Masters in Management is somewhere in between the specialized Masters and the MBA. MBA is much more of a holistic view, and specialized Masters, whether in digital forensics, whether it's in digital marketing, whether it's cybersecurity, is a specialized Masters within the business school, and the management is somewhere. The Masters in Management somewhere in between. Relatively is easier to do that under the Masters of Management because you don't have to talk about that much level on the other side of the MBA curriculum spectrum, which is leadership, strategy, and all of that. For a much more demand for specialized master from younger population, while the MBA 2-year traditional MBA is losing its popularity a little bit, 1-year MBA demand is shooting up, and the students are waiting longer for the MBA program. They usually, and that any of the top 30 programs, as you know, the average work experience is 5 to 6 years right now. So with that shift going on, without any nudging from us, this is the market themselves. I'm just trusting the intelligence of the market. The students are finding a sweet spot for the MBA at an experience level to get a significant return on their investment and move on to the leadership journey. So with that having said, when we develop a statistical certificate, challenge will be holistic way of looking at those certificates so that they do add up to the overall curriculum that you want to drive under that particular degree. It's doable, but a lot more careful thought process has to be given there, especially if you want to do an MBA degree. If you want to do a specialized master's degree, less of a problem. If you want to do a master's in management, little more, but more challenging, but less challenging than doing an MBA with a statistical certificate. So those are the issues, but I certainly agree that there are situations where we have found that starting with the certificate, students back into an immediate skill set they need, then they get more motivated. One of the things is working population coming back and taking that final call to sign up for a degree. But this makes the transition much easier. I said, okay, I'm signing up for 3 or 4 plus, and it has an immediate skill bearing in my job, in my current opportunities and all of that. But once I do that, I realize, well, I can do this as a working professional by disciplined time management. I can do that. That gives you more confidence, and then move on to another 2 or 3 certificate, and there's a continuous learning process continue. So there will be a lot more opportunities of that more and more in the business education.
Building quickly on that.
Sorry, Henrik, yes.
I was just going to say that at Hult we have a dual degree, so basically you can take 2 masters in 2 years, and that's going to build on what Dr. Sen was saying, and that's immensely popular among students. Even we have EMBA students who take part-time their EMBA, and then they go into a 1-year specialized masters at the end. So it's that's something I see increasingly growing in popularity.
Yeah, just a brief comment from me on that. I think the trade-off really is over flexibility, which is obviously a huge advantage. To schools to be able to offer that advantage to students, versus the obvious advantages of integration. And having a program that is truly integrated, where you can truly bring everything together in a way that which demonstrates that the students really understand the bigger picture. And so managing that trade-off is always going to be the challenge with something like stackable certificates. So I think it's about knowing your market, knowing what you want to achieve, knowing what graduates you want to put out there in the marketplace and what you want them to say about their learning experience, and making a decision based on that.
Yeah, I'd be quickly commenting on that. I would agree that if you can just loosely take different courses and then call it something, rather than the ones I've been exploring and involved in, someone is predetermining what courses you can take in order to build that kind of holistic learning, if you want. I think that's an important point there.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think that's it in terms of, we have more questions, but I think we don't have enough time. But as you can all see, we have the 3 speakers' email addresses. So if you want to send them a question directly, you can. This webinar has also been recorded, so you can always refer back to it. And we will provide slides should you want them as well. So again, thank you from my part. Mark, do you have any closing remarks on your end?
Just to say a big thank you to Dr. Sen and Dr. Tosserman for sharing your insights with us. I think it's been a really valuable session. And thank you very much to all the participants for joining us. I hope you found it useful as well. And please do contact me if you have any questions at all. I'm sure my colleagues would also be willing to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.